All right, so I would like to talk a little bit about the experience that people have in working with someone with dementia and the progression of dementia. Now, many people do not have experience with that, even though 1 in 3 Americans dies with dementia. So most often when I'm giving presentations to groups, even talking with high school and middle school students, a significant proportion of them have some experience with it, but not everyone. So I'd like to explain a little bit more in the words of a daughter who is caring for her mother, exactly the kinds of things that you can expect to deal with, because you don't want to deal with that. And I believe that almost everyone does not want someone else to be having to take care of them when they have dementia or Alzheimer's, because it is really a very difficult task. So I'm just going to go through and talk about a few of the points which this patient of mine, Suzanne, was very generous to talk to me about. And of course, I have done so many interviews with individuals who work in the memory care field. And I have a podcast called Natural Solutions with Dr. J, where I interview so many different people related to dementia and Alzheimer's. So I would suggest that you go there as well to really get a good grasp of the significance of it, why you should take this seriously yourself for your own personal reasons. Now, it's an epidemic for a reason. There are many underlying causes of brain degeneration, many underlying reasons for brain degeneration that people have to address early on to avoid that 20, 25-year process progression of Alzheimer's. And we'll actually even talk about that in this little review session as I go over some of the points that Suzanne makes regarding progression of what's going on with her mother. So let's get into it. And when I was videotaping her speaking, I had the videotape going the wrong direction. So I actually was not recording her face. So it's actually a picture of a yard outside the clinic I work in, and a garbage can is out there too. So occasionally I will just show you that so you have an idea of the reality that she is actually speaking. This is not something I made up. You have experience with someone who has dementia?
My mother has dementia. It's been with her for probably 25 years, 15.
Oh,
it's
wow.
been
Wow.
tested. And I've noticed first the decline of the conversation and her needing to push through her. Anyway, that was the first tell. And the
that was how long ago?
And that was almost 15 years ago.
Mm.
And then the test came maybe 10 years.
So Suzanne describes the process of her mother's dementia going over the course of 25 years. Her mother's still alive. She will hear about her experience with her on Mother's Day and the difficulties she has in the caregiving role, because family dynamics often get all tied up in this process as well. And some of you may have fantastic family dynamics, but other people don't. And so there's sibling issues that go on that can be a huge struggle. So we all have enough struggles. People have problems during the holidays. They don't necessarily like going to the holidays and visiting family because there's so much conflict. So there is a certain myth about the bliss of holiday gatherings. But at any rate, these same things that can occur when everyone is in relatively good health are exacerbated when someone has health problems, end of life issues, taking care of dementia, taking care of aging and ill parents and grandparents can be problematic. So anyway, so what she says is that her it's been going on for 25 years. And 15 years ago, when she first started recognizing the conversations she was having with her mother just were not as clear as they should be. And so already 15 years ago, she had started noticing this progression of the brain degeneration. So that was a 10-year gap between when it first started and when there were some functional issues, quite noticeable. And so that's a whole 10 years that they could have got a jump start on taking care of it. And then she said 10 years ago was when there was a diagnosis made of dementia, Alzheimer's. So that's another 10 years in which something could have been done, but it was not done.
She's now to the point where I call it the loops.
Uh-huh.
And the loops come, well, you can get her into 5-minute loops, but then they can be reduced to 30-second loops, the repeated. She called, I left her a Mother's Day rose, and she called 4 times to tell me how nice it was. And the 4th time she says, I know I've already called you, but, so she knew the 4th time she had already called me. But each time she had something different to say. They were all like 5 minutes.
So Suzanne talks about one of the behavioral issues that her mother has very strongly related to memory. And that is what she calls the loop. And so essentially it could be a 5-minute loop or it could be a 10-minute loop. Now, that is when the person does not remember that they actually did something or that they actually spoke to you about something. And for her, every 5 minutes, her mother would call and repeat what she was saying. And at a certain point, she mentions that her mother realizes that she probably talked to her about this already, but it's not clear. So this is a real short-term memory issue that's going on, and this is one of the primary areas that dementia and Alzheimer's hits your brain, is in its short-term memory function. So let's hear what she has to say about the loop.
It's been a struggle to work with. It's very emotionally hard. She can get very mean. But
And was she ever like that before?
oh yeah, but
Yeah.
more. Yeah, I think the essential self comes out.
Okay.
And it's what I've observed.
So she dropped off a rose for her mother on Mother's Day. That was just recently. And her mother called her and said how much she appreciated it. 5 minutes later, she did the same thing. Slightly different words. Another 5 minutes later, she did the same thing. Thank you for the rose. It's not because she was appreciating it that much. I mean, she appreciated it, obviously, but she kept calling because she didn't realize that she'd already called. And she did it again. And this time, her mother said, I'm pretty sure I called you already, but I wanted to tell you how. You know, it's heartwarming that somebody feels so strongly about receiving a rose on Mother's Day. And on the other hand, it's sad that this loop occurred. This loop is a functionality of the brain. It's indicating your brain is not working right. That's not something that you want to deal with. And it can be very difficult for others. And certainly, if you are working, if you're trying to take care of other people, not remembering what you just did could be putting everyone in a dangerous situation. So it makes you dependent on others and not independent in your own life.
It's very emotionally hard. She get very mean. But
Was she ever like that before?
oh yeah.
And so it's extremely emotionally hard on the daughter for this, but it's also difficult for the mother who has dementia. And there's that frustration factor that goes on. Early on, people realize that they are forgetting things. Maybe they go in the next room and they lose their keys, and so they can't find them. They're looking all over the place, can't find the keys. Or they go in the next room because they went there for a specific reason and they can't remember why. When that happens repeatedly, this is a sign that your brain is degenerating. There's something going on. One of the at least 12 factors in the Brain Wealth program that we look at to try to uncover the underlying causes of degeneration that will lead to this memory lapse and difficulty with memory, which then spreads into all parts of your life and makes your life a situation where you're dependent on others, or you could forget, you leave something on the stove, you burn it up, house burns down, all kinds of things, or you go out driving and you can't remember where you are, you can't get back home. You go out for a walk, can't remember where you are, can't get back home. Some very severe consequences of your short-term memory degenerating.
And I don't think she'll ever lose the fact I'm her daughter, ever.
Right.
I'm
Oh,
the
okay.
only daughter. And so I think that she won't ever, she's an only child, I'm her only daughter. She's got 2 sons.
Yeah.
I don't think she'll ever forget me. But she may,
Uh-huh.
and I'm ready for that.
Uh-huh.
It's okay.
And one of the things she mentions is that a person's essential self really comes out in a much more strong way when they have dementia. When we have an area up here in the prefrontal cortex, which is the front part of your cerebrum, front part, right behind the forehead there, which has what's called executive function, the executive control. And deep, as we're developing in utero, as we develop, we start out with just 2 cells, and we gradually get more and more differentiated, more tissue structures. And eventually we start to develop our brain. But when we're first born, we have reflex functioning. Our body is not accommodated to the external world. We have not developed the ability to suppress a lot of the reflexes that we have as a child, sucking reflex, for example. Very important to nurse in order to get nutrition, because we can't chew, we don't have teeth, right? So there are all these deeper reflex functions that we need when we are very young as infants, which are survival mechanisms. Later on, we are able to do higher level functioning, and our prefrontal cortex up here has executive function. That helps to lock down and override a lot of the underlying survival mode types responses or reactions, and we want that. However, as we get older, and if you have dementia, Alzheimer's, and dementia is an umbrella category. Alzheimer's is one of the categories under dementia, and as will be mentioned later, alcoholic dementia is another form of dementia due to alcohol abuse. So the prefrontal cortex and the executive function overrides our older, more basic, emotion-driven, fast response reactive actions. And in this situation, Suzanne rightly points out that our essential nature, what's underneath that executive function, the things that keep it under control, when we lose that executive function, that comes out in stronger ways. It will come out more explosively. If someone is essentially just a very calm and serene person, they will be that way. But if they are cranky, if they are angry and upset, that will come out as well when they have dementia and Alzheimer's. And that is an issue which creates a lot of conflict and difficulty for caregivers, as well as other people around. So there are a lot of different techniques that are used in the memory care field in order to address that, like trying to distract the person or things of that nature. But at any rate, she mentions that her mother's essential nature came out. Let's hear a little more about that.
But she's starting to lose her she's 3 grandchildren. My 2 sons are 2 of them, and younger son has a girlfriend.
Oh, yeah.
They've been together for years. She forgets her name.
Yeah.
So she's to those edges of
Right.
forgetfulness.
Yeah.
I think it's important to have someone in your life that helps remember who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my fear.
Yeah.
It's stunning how different she's become in such a short time. And my hope is that I can pry my way back into the house and start bringing her back out.
Yeah.
But it may not happen. It may be it. It may be the decline.
So forgetting people's names is a characteristic aspect of the early stages of dementia. Sometimes people start to forget names, or names of their pets, names of people closest to them early on. And so watch for that. Already brain function has degenerated significantly enough. Now, Suzanne mentions that she is an only child, and her mother was an only child also. And so she doesn't, her mother's not forgotten her name yet. And she hopes that her mother does not, because that name recognition is something that we all really respond to. Remembering people's names and saying people meet them is a really good practice, which I mentioned in my TV segments on how to prevent Alzheimer's and dementia. Is remembering people's names a great thing to do, because that's a counterweight to your brain's degenerating in that functionality. But her mother has not necessarily forgotten her name, but she is forgetting the names of Suzanne's children, the great grandkids, and the girlfriend of a son. So, very common thing.
Much being yelled at. My sister-in-law, I believe, also has an alcoholically driven dementia. She's her caretaker. And when you're yelled at incessantly all day, every day for what you do wrong, as a dementia person, you start to shut down. Your brain just wants to shut down.
Yeah. I think it's important to have someone in your life to help you remember who you are.
And she makes such an important point. It's important to have somebody in your life who knows who you are. And that's when you don't know who you are. I mean, think about it. You're all here, many people who are part of this brain wealth and longevity program are really interested in succeeding more and more online. And knowing yourself and knowing your history and having others know who you are is a real key factor. So if you don't know who you are, the question is, do you have a life? I mean, you're alive, but do you actually have a fulfilling life? If you have no idea who you are or where you came from, certainly living in the moment, that's a different thing. Living in the now, that's a different thing. Maybe individuals are living in the now, but they've lost any connection with how the now corresponds to their past and the people around them. And walking around not knowing anyone and getting a little scared of that, not a nice place to be. This is, again, a reason I continue to just describe these to you, because avoiding brain degeneration, doing what you can now to add years to your life and life. This is life meaning memorable life. Adding life to your years is a real key component of what we're doing here with the Brain Wealth and Longevity Program.
On Mother's Day, she begged me not to come over because she would be yelled at if I came over.
Oh,
and that was
so
too much
sad.
for her.
Oh, yeah.
Please don't. Kathy will yell at me. Kathy will yell at me. And this is a woman who yelled at everyone.
So right now we're in the middle of still the shelter in place process here with the COVID-19 epidemic. And because of that, she cannot go visit her mother as freely as she would like to. And her mother is becoming more and more isolated. Social isolation is something which is a real negative for our brains, because we are social beings. Whether we're introverted, whether we're hermits or not, there is a certain social being aspect of who we are. And in this shelter in place environment, which many people are going through now and never happened before, there's a lot of webinars, a lot of other connections that people are making, a lot of phone calls that I'm making also with family and friends, at a greater degree than before, because we really need that connection. Older people get depressed easily if they lose the connections. A lot of them, many of their best friends have died. And as friends die, little by little, your social network has disappeared. And that is very difficult for individuals and their psychic ability and their health, their overall energetic feeling. So that social connection is very important. And here Suzanne is concerned about the fact that this social connection has not been able to be maintained for her mother who has dementia. So this is a particular concern. And also, one of the things that happens with people who have dementia and Alzheimer's, if they're around people who do not understand them, do not know their history, when they start to speak about something, they lose track. They can lose the words, the next words that are part of the sequence, and that's extremely frustrating. And if someone is there to keep them on track, to fill in the words and let them go on, they feel that connection, like someone's listening, someone knows who they are. When you lose that ability to carry on that conversation that's continuous, it's very, very hard on one's sense of self. And so this is another reason why she's concerned, because she's afraid this long isolation period right now going on about the 10th week is really could be the end of her mother's connection, because her brain is degenerating because of lack of this social connection. Yeah.
I would have had to sit with her. And I'd do it now. I'd love to read with her, but I'm not allowed into the house.
So if you're around caregivers, it doesn't matter actually if you're really healthy or not, but particularly if you have dementia, being yelled at for doing all the little wrong things all day long shuts you down. And this apparently is what's going on with Suzanne's mother, because of a sister who is there who also has alcoholic dementia, and alcohol tends to disinhibit. It breaks down executive function, like we talked about before. And so anger and upset and abusive language is very common in alcoholism. And so to have an alcoholic taking care of someone with dementia and putting them down all the time is really, really a bad thing. Think about your future. Do you have any alcoholics in your family who might be taking care of you and mentally, even perhaps physically abusing you? You don't put yourself in that position. Take some action now. Do something to do everything that you can to prevent your brain and your body from degenerating. And that's what my program is all about. So let's hear a little bit more here.
I'm understanding not to go over because she's being yelled at. So sad. Oh yeah. Please don't practically yell at me. This is a woman who yelled at everyone.
So the social isolation issue for Suzanne, her mother said, don't come over. Please don't come over. She wants her to come. Her mother wants Suzanne to come over, her only daughter. But the woman taking care of her will yell at her for having her daughter come over. And that yelling and that criticism and all is very, very hard on anyone, and particularly if you have dementia. And so the daughter is torn because she wants to go over and see her mom. There's the social isolation, shelter in place thing that's necessary. But the mother says, I want you to come, but don't come. It's a conflict in her mind, and that in and of itself is not healthy either for the mother's health.
Yeah. I would have had to sit with her. I'd do it now. I'd love to read with her, but I'm not allowed into the house.
And Suzanne would love to go over and read to her mom, but she's not allowed to come over to the house. So her mom is missing out because there is someone, a caretaker. It's hard to call this person a caregiver. It's not easy taking care of someone who has dementia, but for sure, it's very, very, very difficult. I know so many people who are doing that, and it's really, really hard. And if you're working full time at the same time, it is a drain. People are physically exhausted taking care of someone who has dementia, Alzheimer's. So do everything you can. Do you want to put other people in that position where they have to take care of you? I don't think so. I think you should take some action, which you are. You're part of this Brain Wealth Longevity Facebook group, but take further action to try to turn this around, the possibility, so that you have a full life all the way until your death.
Well, thank you for sharing that with me, because a lot of people don't have that personal experience working with someone who has that, and they don't, and they don't understand it if they should try to avoid getting there. Yeah, you know?
but it was something she always worried about.
Yeah.
And I used to encourage her to use the brain to help her out with little games on the phone. It was too late.
That's so interesting. Again, I appreciate Suzanne very much for sharing this. While she was having her treatment, she mentioned something about this whole thing with her mother, and I wanted to hear more. And she was very generous to allow me to record this and share this with you. She mentioned that as she was going along with her mother, she would have her mother do little games and stuff over the telephone as much as possible. And those can be helpful, but people think that these games are going to keep their brain from degeneration. Well, they will help certain aspects, but brain degeneration caused by toxicity, heavy metal toxicity, blood sugar imbalances, things like that, those are not going to be corrected by games. I'm sorry. That's not what my program is about. You can get those kind of things all over the internet. They're great. They're wonderful. My mother and my aunt, who lived to be late 80s and mid 90s, they used to call each other in the morning. They had 7 years apart. They lived in Indianapolis. And they used to call each other in the morning, and they would work on crossword puzzles together. But they would also look in the Indianapolis Star at the obituaries. Interesting. No, I don't think most people do that. But as they were getting older, they'd say, "Oh, did you see the so and so die? Oh, did you see the so and so?" Again, it's that sense of gradual social isolation from individuals you grew up with, you have these strong personal connections with. And so her mom was being fed these games by Suzanne, but she felt it was too late. Too little, too late. You don't want it to be too little, too late in taking charge of your health and the health of those you love, so that you don't necessarily have to take care of them, and you certainly don't want them to have to take care of you in this situation. At least I think most people feel that way. So in short, this is not only an issue of yourself, but it's an issue of taking care of the future caregivers you have, and you being a caregiver as well, doing the best you can with the circumstances you have. 1 in 3 Americans dies with dementia, and that's a huge statistic. I don't think it was that high before. It's just like the statistics on autism are rising. I don't think it was that way before. There are things going on environmentally that are significant factors in the reason why this is happening, and those are some of the 12 different factors that are part of my brain wealth and longevity program. So let's go ahead and let's talk a little bit about what the different levels of subscription and membership are about.